La La Land, supposedly, you know, when they have the envelope flow, which is before, I guess, before Chris Rock got slapped by Will Smith a couple years ago. It was that was the most famous Oscars flub ever.
Yeah,
but,
it was.
The streaker.
And then, yeah, the streaker and Sacagawea, I guess, or not Sacagawea. Sachin Littlefeather, yes. Yeah. So, Larry, tell us kind of your thoughts on this, what your reaction was at the time, how it's aged for you.
We were talking at dinner at Langvan, and we both agreed that, in a way, if Brokeback Mountain had been made at this time, it would have won an Oscar as well. It was too early to vote, I think, in the early aughts, or the late 90s, for a gay-themed movie. It just, too much of the old guard in Hollywood was still there, too many people who simply couldn't acknowledge that that love story might be the best of the year. And so eventually the default movie was Crash. And by the time 2017 came around, people were more accepting of the idea that a really touching story about a person's coming of age against extremely difficult circumstances deserved an award regardless of gender, race, whatever.
Sexuality.
I was blown away by this when I saw it. It was my second favorite movie of that year. We're going to be showing my favorite movie that year in 4 weeks, which was Arrival. And I watched it again later, and I watched it again last night. And I was just as moved as ever. You know, when you watch a movie the third time, you obviously know the story, you kind of know bits of dialogue, but I watched it exclusively for visuals this time, really. Not just cinematography, but this was based on a play, on a 3-act play that was literally structured the same way. Act 1, Little, Act 2, Chiron, Act 3, Black. And I was watching the movie thinking, how could this be a play? There's like 2 and 3 minutes at a time when they say about 6 words. You couldn't possibly do that on a stage. So Barry Jenkins made a movie that is a visual understanding of whatever kind of a play Terrell McCraney, who worked with him on the screenplay, had produced. The name of the play, and I want to get this right because it's important, is In Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue. And that's why this film is named Moonlight. It's a condensation of that title.
And that's what he says the Cuban woman said to him. I think that's Juan.
That's what Juan says, exactly. Yeah. And that's why among the 3 visual looks for the film, you have that really bright, harsh, overexposed look, which is the world in which he lives, where the sun is beating on you and you're exposed to terrible things a lot of the time. You have a sort of a golden look, which is what he has in dreams or when he's sort of fantasizing. And then you have the blue look, which is the look of calm and peace. And that's why at the end, he remembers himself looking at the ocean, because the ocean for him is a place of peace, and the cinematography goes to blue. And that's the title McCraney based on was the famous saying, which I think is Irish, "At night all cats are gray." And his idea was, by moonlight, we all start to have a different look. We look like the people around us, and we get to maybe shed a little bit of the judgments and attitudes that people present to us during the day. Something I do not understand, Terrell McCraney wrote the play and the first draft of the screenplay, and the nastiest person in this movie is named Terrell. Right? That's the guy who gets hit with the chair. So I have no idea what sort of reason that is, but he named the most unpleasant, genuinely bullying, unpleasant character for himself. Yeah. Clearly he didn't act that way. He was gay growing up. I'm sure he didn't bully gay kids, but it's an interesting mix. You know, when I saw this, I assumed that Barry Jenkins was probably gay to be able to get a sense of what life would have been like for Little and Chiron. He's not. He's heterosexual, has kids. And he said in an interview, I wasn't very comfortable telling a story that wasn't from my own sexual point of view or my own background. But it turns out he and McCraney both grew up in the Liberty City area of Miami, a year apart. Jenkins was born in 79 and McCraney in 80, I think, or vice versa, but I think that's how it goes. They didn't know each other, but they both had very similar circumstances. Both of their mothers were addicted to drugs. Jenkins's mother was a runaway who had him when she was very young. She was not able to identify his father. His father was just out of the picture as he is for Little. And he found out later, as he grew up, that his mother told him his father had abandoned the family because he wasn't sure that Jenkins was his son, that his wife had been too promiscuous to be able to pin down who the dad was. And so you see a lot of the story, even though it's McCraney's autobiography more than not, you see a lot of Jenkins' story in it too, and that's why he felt comfortable telling it. Well, there was a long time between questions. Say something.
No, I was struck on first viewing, not even knowing that it had been a play, how much acting the performers in this film do with their bodies and their facial expressions, and how, I mean, there is so little dialogue. I mean, Little / Chiron / Black is not a very vocal guy, and you know, Kevin calls him out on that repeatedly, like, are you gonna say anything? Are you gonna say anything? And so they do so much acting with their bodies, with their facial expressions. So to find out that this came from a stage play, where you can't, you know, most members of the audience can't read those things the way you can on film, was just sort of amazing that was the derivation of it. My other comment with this was, my wife, we were watching it on streaming, and my wife watched the first 2 chapters, and then she skipped the 3rd chapter because I think it was the scene when he hits him with the chair. Like, it was very strange. Like, my reaction, like, I could not I saw him winding up to hit him with the chair, and I could not watch the blow land, even though I'd had no trouble watching him him get beaten up brutally just a few minutes earlier on screen. And it really spoke to the level of characterization that had been done. Like, I knew, like, you basically, what Chiron's life is about to be flashes before the viewer's eye in that moment as he's winding up to hit Terrell with the chair, of like, you're screwing yourself. Like, you're gonna go to juvenile hall. Your whole life is gonna be destroyed because of this, and that it makes it viscerally hard to watch. I don't know if people here in the theater tonight had that same reaction, but I looked down. I couldn't watch it.
And you said that Sarah was...
My wife was like, she's like, I'm out. and the interesting thing, and we talked about this a little bit at dinner, was who all saw American Fiction, the Jeffrey Wright film that played here last December. In lesser hands, this material could very easily have been My Pathology, which is the satirical novel that the Jeffrey Wright character, you know, writes in that film, and it is sort of all the sort of stereotypical things that you think of African American poverty in this country. Because
you have a drug dealer, and you have a crack mom,
yep,
and
you got a crack. You
have a single. No father, and a son
yep.
growing up in relative poverty, and these are the elements of melodrama.
Yeah. And yet, in these hands, and with the twist of the kind of the sexuality piece of it as well, and the cinematography and the performance of the actors, it's such an elevated experience. Like, I was really struck by that. It could easily have been My Pathology, but it turned into, you know, a worthy Best Picture winner.
I'm going to just say this now because it's a change of focus, but if I don't say it, I'll forget it. And I'm so proud that I found it out that I want to share. All through this movie, the first time I watched it, I thought that the middle character's name was spelled S-H-Y-R-O-N-E, Chiron, that's what they were saying. And then it came up in the credits, and it was C-H-I-R-O-N. And I thought, where have I seen that? That name has meaning. And I dug around in Greek mythology, where it's pronounced Chiron, but spelled the same way. And Chiron is a centaur who, being half horse, half human, is unlike the other centaurs. The other centaurs are wild and violent and savage. Chiron is peaceful, calm, wants harmony. He wants to be with humans, but they don't really have any use for him because he's a centaur.
He's a horse.
And well, halfway anyway.
Yeah.
And the centaurs don't want him because they see him as weak or spiritually unfit. And he kind of floats from one world to the other, basically by himself. In the end, he's actually a bit of a hero in Greek mythology. He becomes a mentor and a teacher to Hercules, Aesculapius, the first great physician in recorded Greek annals. And he is wounded by an arrow, and he's immortal, but he's in pain all of his life. And he finally goes to Zeus and says, I can't stand it anymore, you got to do something. And Zeus says, I can take away your immortality and let you die, and you will be peaceful. And he does that, and Chiron dies, and he makes him the constellation Centaurus. If you look up in the skies, Chiron is looking down on you. And that's really analogous, not the being shot with an arrow part, of course, but the part about I don't fit in either world, humans don't want me because they don't understand me, my own people, my centaur people, they don't want me because they think I'm weak and incapable of being a centaur, a real tough, wild centaur. And that's why, I'm sure, I don't know this, McCraney and Jenkins decided that that was the name of that character. It so perfectly embodies who he is.
Let's talk about the cast a little bit. I went to Andre Holland, who is in two of my favorite Steven Soderbergh productions, The Nick, the television show that ran for 2 series, and then was in played a sports agent in High Flying Bird, which was another Soderbergh production. So I loved when Holland showed up as Kevin in the last act there. But talk about some of the other actors who figure in here, because they're all amazing. That was the other thing between chapter 1 and chapter 2. My wife goes, "Wait a minute, that kid looks exactly the same. Chiron looks exactly the same as Little. It's like a perfect."
It's like they waited 10 years and shot the second thing, like a Richard Linklater movie. This is a lightning struck once kind of movie. That doesn't mean Andre Holland doesn't work. He certainly does. Mahershala Ali works. Janelle Monáe is more of a singer, but she does act. Right after this, she was in Hidden Figures, which was a great movie for her and a good movie generally.
Naomi Harris.
And say again?
Naomi Harris.
And Naomi Harris, who works well. Naomi Harris was already known from the Pirates of the Caribbean and 28 Days Later. But the guys who are the central guys have not gone on to a great deal. A little bit. The main person who moved up was Ashton Sanders, who played Chiron. He was in the Whitney Houston film biography as Bobby Brown, who's sort of the villain of that piece, or a villain of that piece. And he's working pretty consistently, but the other actors, when you look at their credits, have had a kind of a hard-scrabble time of it.
Chiron.
I mean, they work.
He's definitely an award-winning actor. I think he was in the Ava film, When They See Us.
The Ava DuVernay film?
Yes.
Okay. And then somebody was in Judas and the Black Messiah.
Yeah, they're doing well. Mahershala Ali.
Well, he's working all the time.
Yes. These are well-known actors.
Not in such high-profile projects as a rule, though. I mean, each of them has done 1 or 2 things.
Mahershala Ali has been in Green Book.
Ali is working all the. I grant you, Ali. We've talked about that. But the others.
Jerome with the When They See Us. I think it wasn't with the fact checking. It's a little off.
Jenkins made a TV series, Underground Railroad, but his feature film career has kind of stalled. He made If Beale Street Could Talk after this. I think that's his last feature, and that was 6 years ago. McCraney made High Flying Bird, and
With Soderbergh,
yeah. But again, his film career has kind of stalled. Laxton, the great cinematography here, not shooting features, and when he does shoot them, he waits for Jenkins, who isn't making them. So he is not working as much as he might. Interesting thing about him, it was a commonplace for many years, partly because Spike Lee argued this all the time, that if you are going to have a film with black characters, you need a black cinematographer, because they will not understand how to light it and how to shoot the various shades of black skin, from light brown to very dark brown. And that was sort of considered a truism for a long time. But Laxton, who is white, and who has shot all of Jenkins' work, does an amazing job here, making every different skin tone beautiful and interesting to look at, and lighting it in just the way that your eyes go right to faces, they go right to heads, they gather visual information for you. And he, I think, was maybe the first white cinematographer who regularly worked with a black director that showed that you might know your craft even if you're not necessarily African American. So that's an unusual event for Laxton. This is not to say that nobody, I didn't mean to imply that everyone's not employed, but that people are not making the kind of magic that, to me, Moonlight is. And I'm not a fan of Green Book, so I'm glad Ali, who's a wonderful actor, won an Oscar for it, but it's better than Crash.
Yes, it is.
But I don't think it's like, you know, that's not something we'll all watch in 20 years, whereas this is. And I don't know that anybody involved in this has had a second project where I would say, boy, 10 years from now, I'd like to revisit that, or 15 years from now, I'd like to revisit that.
Something you said just reminded me, and I'm sorry for looking down at my phone, but the podcast, if anybody listens to the podcast, 99% Invisible, which is this is kind of the crowd for, kind of an NPR crowd, right? But 99% Invisible did a really great episode in November 2021 on the issue of film and photographing black people and the issues that came up as Kodak basically optimized their film stock for photographing white people and for calibrating the printing of film. So that's, if you're more interested in more on that topic, that's a podcast episode that's very interesting to listen to. Yes, ma'am.
What is the podcast?
It's called 99% Invisible, and it's available on most podcast apps. And the guy who hosted Roman Mars has one of the greatest voices ever, so highly recommend it. So.
Should we talk a little bit about the timing of this film's release and when it came out?
Yeah.
This was a project that Jenkins and McCraney had worked on for a long time before they got it made. And it came out in they were finishing it in the last year of Obama's presidency. And there had been a renaissance of films by black directors or with leading black characters. 12 Years a Slave, the Black Panther miniseries, not the film with Chadwick Boseman, but the one with Jimon Unsu on TV. Selma, the resurrection of the Rocky franchise as Creed, Fruitvale Station with Michael B. Jordan. There were many, many films that were in play right in that, especially the second part of the Obama 2 terms. And Jenkins said, if I had waited another year to 2 years to make this film, I don't think I would have been able to make it. It came out 2 weeks after the election of Donald Trump. And he felt that at that point, the cultural landscape had changed enough that investors, banks, studios, whoever, distributors, were not going to support black projects unless they were giant epics like Black Panther, the Chadwick Boseman movie. But that small black independent films were not going to find as much of an audience as they might. And I think that that's true. They didn't go away, certainly, but there was a period where they weren't getting financed as much, they weren't getting released as much, certainly not in the United States. And he felt, he said, and I quote, if I'd waited 1 to 2 more years, I doubt Moonlight would ever have been made. There was also an issue that the rise of homophobia would have made it difficult for there to be a climate for the film to be accepted the way that it was at the time. McCraney said something interesting. Someone asked him and said they felt like the African American community was not embracing this film. And he said, some homophobia is essentially misogyny masked as homophobia. Anti-feminism is rampant, and when it comes to someone's notion of what a man, especially a black man, should be, it ties back to that understanding. People feel there is a way to be masculine, and that masculinity means a kind of superiority, which is really just misogyny. And I think that that's endemic in all parts of American society, not particular to black culture. It comes out in all kinds of different ways. So he was acknowledging both that there might be a homophobic response that was negative, but also that people had stereotypical ideas of what men ought to be regardless of the way they behaved, and that this did not in any way conform to them. Nobody doesn't think black is tough and can take care of himself in a fight, but he's had to, because of his anxiety about gender, cover up the part of him that is gentler, to cover up the part of him that is more able to relax and let other people in.
The scene where he's they're doing the count
in the third episode.
In the third episodes, yeah, and it is sort of classic in that regard, because at first it sort of reads like, you know, could have been a scene from The Wire, and, you know, getting the count wrong and this and that, and retribution for that, and then you're sort of expecting him to, I think you said this, you know, you're expecting him to pistol whip the guy or something, and then all of a sudden it flips and he kind of softens on the guy and he's like, nah, I was just, you know, I'm just messing with you, but, you know, there's a lesson in this because people will always mess with you, and this is my way of kind of preparing you for that. And so he sort of reaches a modus vivendi on that by the end of the film, I think.
You know, I don't think there's any character in this that ends up where we think they're going to be when we first meet them. Well, maybe the evil Terrell, who gets hit with the chair. Juan is a guy who is making a living selling crack, but he's also gentle and teaches Little to swim. And Teresa, who is named for 2 different Catholic saints, is a gentle, kindly woman who lives very comfortably on the earnings of a drug dealer. No problem with that. The mom starts off and you think, oh no, it's crack mom, no, no. And yet she turns into a person capable of compassion and asking for forgiveness, which he is able finally to grant, Black is able to grant. The characters all go in a direction where suddenly you think, oh man, I wasn't expecting that. And I think that's true of little Chiron Black as well, in that, okay, now he's made himself into Juan, and he's tough, and he has a do-rag, and he has an earring, I think he has 2 earrings, I think, and he's carrying a gun, and he's down in the corner selling drugs, but
he's got the crown on the dashboard.
He's got the little crown on the dashboard of his big sedan, but he's also going eventually to go in a direction that isn't what we associate with that kind of a person in our experience with film. And that's one of my favorite things about this is every single character goes in a different way. I mean, think about Kevin in the middle episode. He shows sudden tenderness and affection that we didn't count on. We'd just seen him as a kind of a roughhousing boy. But because he's not man enough to stand up to people whose respect he thinks he wants, he's also capable of giving Chiron a beatdown after having shown tenderness. So he goes in a way we don't expect and then snaps back. And that's a great thing for me. Any film where people are going in directions I didn't foresee is always a joy, and all of them do it here, really.
Questions, thoughts, comments? Our Dutch friend, I know you got something, buddy.
2 things. One is that from this movie, I realized for myself that I shouldn't have any judgment on other races, because I don't understand it. And I wonder whether you have any follow-up on what happened to the young Chiron. Where is he now? Because I thought his acting was superb, the boy.
He's the guy that we were talking about, Ashton Sanders, who's had a fairly busy career. He was in the Whitney Houston film biography. He has worked again with Barry Jenkins. I think he's maybe in Underground Railroad.
Are you talking about Little? Are you talking about the first chapter?
Yeah, the child, the young boy.
Oh, the child. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about, you said Chiron, who was the middle one. I thought that's who you meant. I have to look up Little. I did look him up, and I don't know how busy he was or was not.
I thought he was very good. I mean, it was really remarkable how he did it. How can they condition a young boy this way, that he performs so brilliantly, at least
the acting, the scene when he and Kevin are talking sort of off to the side in that field. The boys are playing a game we used to call Kill the Pill when I was a kid, and they're sort of off to the side, and I was like, man, these kids are like, it was very good acting for child actors. I was really impressed.
He's in Good Burger too.
He's in Good Burger too.
He'd probably be grateful if you didn't mention that.
But he's in Black Panther.
His name is Alex R. Hibbert.
And he did have a small role in Black Panther. But you know, with children, when I've interviewed directors who got good performances out of children, often they give them just a couple of words to say and then let them say the rest of the sentence the way that they would want to say it, that would naturally be. My guess is, as good as he was, that's probably because he was doing what he felt comfortable doing, and Jenkins was letting him do it, rather than saying, all right, now here there are 3 emotions, and I want them in this order, and I want you to look to your eyes to the left when you say this. Most children are great when they are great, because they're allowed to be great, not taught or made to be great. That's been my experience in talking to directors.
It looks like he also has a recurring role in a television series called The Chi, as in Chicago. So.
Okay.
And that's characterized as a coming-of-age / teen drama. So there you go.
Well, he was in a coming-of-age / adolescent drama. Now he's in a coming-of-age teen drama. By the way, someone asked me, what genre is this? And the answer is, it's the coming-of-age genre. It's not a genre about black people or gay people or people who live in poverty or anything like that. It's a coming-of-age story. It's not my story. My coming-of-age story was very different. But it is that's a famous American genre, is the coming-of-age film. You know, ever since Huckleberry Finn, that's been a thing. And this is exactly that. Each segment is 10 years apart, and you see him as an adolescent, high school student, and a young adult. And so to me, this fits perfectly with the coming-of-age genre. It just adds layers to it. But that's why, if we're looking at a genre-busting series, that's the genre that's getting busted. I want to say one other thing here real quick. When this came out, and I gave it a very positive review for the Observer, someone said, well, how would you know if it was authentic? You know, you're not black, you're not the son of a single parent, you grew up in a lower middle class family, not a lower class family, you're not gay. Who are you to say that it's real or that it's honest or any of the kinds of positive things we say about movies we like? And the answer is, I'm not any of those things. If that was what was required to be a critic, you would go, all right, Larry, you do the movies about old white guys from New Jersey, get busy, you know, do that. And you over there, you'll do the movies about young women. You'll do the old women movies, you'll do the straight black movies, you'll do the gay black. You'd have a staff like 25 critics who would bring their expertise. What you look at as a critic is not, could I put myself in Little's shoes? No, of course I couldn't. But what I can do is say, have I ever felt isolation? Have I felt loneliness? Have I put on a fake hard shell when I felt weak and defenseless, like a little crab? Have I been somebody who was bullied and then who maybe even wanted somebody to bully back, unfortunately? And those things are true, and they're universal. And the fact that I grew up in a farm town where, well, the only black person actually that I knew lived next door to me, which is kind of interesting. I didn't have these experiences in any way, but I'm able to identify with the characters because of their internal life, not their external life. And that's what a critic should be trying to do.
Well said. And I would just say from my experience, and this goes to my consulting practice as well, not that I'm particularly here to sell that, but everybody has a story, right? Everybody's got a story, and we all feel pain, whether, and none of us can really stand and say that somebody else's pain is not real, because we all experience it in our own way. And so, I think everybody in some way has felt like an outsider. Everybody in some ways in their lives has felt what you were describing, isolation.
And has felt judged on some level and made to be felt inferior because they're being judged. Everybody has faced that in some way, I would think.
Yeah. So I mean, the art with which those feelings are depicted here are what really.
Those are the connecting points for anybody, really.
All right. I think
Yeah, man. Anybody else have questions or comments? We'll take them.
Good. All
If
right.
not, hope to see you in 2 weeks for
Pan's Labyrinth.
Pan's Labyrinth.